GLOBEClaritas is proud to deliver our latest release, which is 2023.2.1 to our clients around the world. This new release includes some new improved functionality in terms of UI UX. It makes things easier for our current users, as well as a new specialized deghosting solution for high-res and ultra-high resolution marine seismic datasets for geotechnical work offshore. This new HRDEGHOST application or module carries on from the HRQC or high-res QC package from last year and actually can be utilized in conjunction with that application. So I'll just quickly sort of open up a job flow with the new HRDEGHOST module in. Right, so that's you can see a standard Claritas job flow, and you can see in there that we've got an HRDEGHOST module in there. So HRDEGHOST is a more typical Claritas module in that it sits in a processing flow where you have an input module, any other processing you want to do to the data, and then an output module at the end of the processing flow. So it sits within a size read, size write loop, if you like. So the application actually by default uses multi-threading, so there's no requirement to put it inside an MPI start end loop, and in fact it's currently precluded from running in an MPI start end loop as it manages the threading itself. So you can see there's some shared parameterization with the high-res QC application in terms of upsample, minimum delay, etc. And then there's some ghost characterization and estimation parameters around the window length, window step, number of estimation nodes for spectra in the X direction and time direction, number of estimation nodes for parameters in the X direction and time direction, maximum number of iterations, and our termination tolerance. We can also write out some QC headers at the end of it, so we get an idea of how good the process is. And then we've got some deghosting parameters, so a constant component of white noise amplitude, and then the amplitude proportional component of white noise amplitude. So we're just using a very sort of 0.1% white noise in the data. Help information can be accessed by clicking on the help button, which will bring up a web browser with the help documentation. So there's a good overview of how the application runs, and then further detail on all of the parameters available in the application, and some requirements for what's needed in the dataset. So the pick header is required to be accurate, and for that reason it's best to use the FBQC to generate the pick header, i.e. use the FBQC repick NN. Could use the first break time header if you were really confident about your first break picking, but generally we'd advise going through the automated picking of the water bottom in SV and then feeding that into the FBQC application to refine the picks. So going back to the sort of first few parameters here, the upsample max delay, we can test those based on the high-res QC application. So you can see in there we've got an upsampling ratio, wavelet length, etc. So we can play around with those parameters, see how effective and how well they work in this application to confirm what's optimal for the actual job flow itself. And then the other thing to bear in mind is it works on a number of shots at a time. So I think the default is sort of 10 shots at a time. You can increase that. So depending on how much variation you have between shot gathers, if they're relatively consistent, then you can use a larger number of shots in the group. If they're very variable, then you probably want to use a smaller number of shots in the num shots parameter to optimize your processing flow. The more shots you can run in one pass or at a time, the faster the application will run. So sort of bear that in mind. Similarly, the wind length, wind step, etc. will have an effect on the run times. So I will close that down. I will quickly bring up some data to show you some results on stacks and shot gathers. So I'll show you stacks first. We have a stack section. Just so we can see it a bit better, I'm going to put a balance on, see it a little bit more. If I toggle between there, you can see there's quite a change around the water bottom. Produce a little seismic data zoom window through there, just to focus in on that water bottom. And then if I click all panels and then toggle between the two, you can see it's quite effectively. So that's the data pre-HRDEGHOST, and you've got sort of a rumble through there, which is the ghost event rumbling through that near surface. If I then apply the HRDEGHOST, you can see that it's collapsing that quite effectively. We're getting a little more detail of onlapping events onto the water bottom. Again, this deeper event, we're sort of cleaning up the wavelet, so collapsing the ghost component back in to give a cleaner event down there. So you can see it's working quite well on this data set. If I then bring up some shot gathers, I'm going to get shot gathers here. I've got the shot gather before HRDEGHOST and after, so you can again see that it's cleaning up the shot gather quite nicely. If I then go analysis, seismic data zoom over a small window, bring that in, all panels, and then again show you that. So you can see again there's that sort of ghost event below the water bottom, pre HRDEGHOST, and then afterwards I've got a nice clean water bottom. That ghost event's been effectively removed, so things are looking a lot nicer on this result. So that's what I'll say about the HRDEGHOST application. So if you're working on sort of high res or ultra high resolution seismic data, well worth a look. And if you do happen to be at the Near Surface Geophysics Conference by the EAG in Edinburgh in September of 2023, we are delivering a paper on this new deghosting solution. So you might want to pop along to the seismic processing for offshore wind part of the conference and listening to what our R&D geophysicist Mark Henderson has to say about this new capability. What we'll do as well is then show you. So for a number of years we've had a couple of applications in Claritas that allow you to either view and check out information about a seismic file in Claritas. So that's whether it's a CSEG-Y file or an HDF5 file. And so that application is called SLI, so seismic listings. And then we also had another application called SETDISCFOLD, which allowed you to update key binary headers that sometimes didn't get updated correctly during the processing flow. We've rolled those into one application now called QSEIS. So if you click on the little I symbol in the SeisRead module, for instance, click on that, it will bring up the new application, bring it across onto this screen. So to make things a little bit easier to understand what's going on, we've sort of maintained but sort of split up the sort of typical top part of the SLI display. So we've got information on the data set. You can see it's a button, so we can change to a different data set just by clicking on that, and it'll pull up the file browser. And then we've got an allow edits and save changes. So if I click on allow edits, it will then allow me to update information in here. I'll show you that in a bit. It tells you what project that this file is associated with, what the file format is, and when the file was created in this first part of the pane. Then we have information around sample rate, primary, secondary key, number of samples, data format, sort code, and then shot, ensemble, fold, whether line numbers present in the project, whether the project's had phases set up, and whether the geometry is defined or is present in this file. So in this case, those aren't. We haven't got lines set up, and we haven't got phase set up, and the geometry is not present. And also tells you the range, primary key range, and the total number of traces in the file. Then we have the standard Claritas processing history displayed with hyperlinks to the different file types that are in there, so it'll open them up in the relevant editor type. So whether it's a job flow editor, the XSDE editor for with the mutes, or SV for launching some data to display it. The textual header, if it's available, will show you information about the data set. So, well, it'll show you effectively the original eBasidic header from the data when you reformatted. The binary header displays all information about the binary, the 400-byte binary header in the data set, so you can see how that's set up and if that's correct. The trace header listing. This allows you basically, if you right mouse button click, you can define some headers that you want to display. By default, it'll display the first 400 traces. You can change that to more traces or less traces if you want to. If I click OK, you can see it's displaying the trace number, the shot ID that is associated with the channel number and then the offsets in the header. So if you like, it's like an interactive TR print of the data. Trace header ranges, again, sort of as we typically had in our SLI module or application, the ability to show with live traces the minimum and maximum range in that trace header. So we can check the trace header range for shot ID, the first break amplitude header, and stuff like that. And then the support files is effectively the support files table. It tells you what support files are associated with this job flow in terms of these jobs or mute and pick files. So it's a nicer, cleaner display than the old SLI. It has the added functionality or added capability of rolling in the SETDISCFOLD, so we can basically click on the allow edits. You can see that the color of all these different fields changes, so we can then type into ensemble fold 84. That change is not made until I click on the save changes button, which I won't do because that would make it incorrect. But similarly, I could also decide to click here and say, yes, source receiver and CDP geometry is present, for instance. And I can check that because I can see CDPs are there and we've got source XYs. And so if I'm happy with that change I've made, I can click on save changes and it will update the binary header and then changes that to be a grade as it's now present in the file. So a nice simple utility, gives you lots of information, allows you to interrogate your datasets quite effectively and quickly just to see what's going on with them and make some changes to binary headers if there's some issues there that you need to address. I think that's enough on QSEIS. Then the other change that we've made in this release, and I'll probably swap over to the marine dataset for this one, is some of our utilities. We've aimed to give them a newer, nicer interface. So if I get the velocities on and say create a basic NMO field, you can see that we've again updated to a more modern PyQt application. We can provide information in this file in terms of velocities NMO and then set it up so 0 examples. We're going to get it on CDP1, and if I click OK, it then will bring up again then the more modern sort of like our log file interface information about whether the application was successful and shows you the file it's created. So all our utilities now use this more modern interface. It's just nicer, simpler to use and easy, just a more pleasant modern display to look at. And finally, the other sort of key new capability in this application, in this release, is the new 3D viewer. It's supplied as a beta release. It's only able to view and display SegWire revision 1 files at this time, but we will basically look to add in functionality to read HDF5 files at the next release. Click on the 3D viewer beta in the seismic data display tab. There we go, and it's identified a SegWire file that it can read. So I click open on that and it will launch a browser that uses an HTML display method to display the data on screen. There we can see the data, so we can use typical mouse to pan around, move the display, zoom in using the mouse or middle mouse button, mouse wheel. The inline crossline displayed on there. We can flip to a 2D view of inlines, flip back to 3D, and then we can use the slider bars to navigate through. In addition, we have some further buttons up here which allow us to fit the display to screen, so returns it to how the zoom level it was originally. Open a window to look at the episodic header. So we can toggle that off and on. This one didn't have a populated episodic header, so we can toggle that off. We can look at information around trace headers, toggle that off again, and we can also interact with how we're displaying, i.e. the gradient scale, whether we're playing wiggle, reverse polarity, annotation information, etc. So we have some controls on that. You can obviously use the browser of your choice. And as I will look to add new functionality through coming releases to make this more of a powerful tool, but certainly is a There's a 3D viewer. It's an improvement over our current 3D viewing capabilities. And you can also view 2D lines within the application as well. But obviously we look forward to your feedback on this new application, and any comments you want to give us, that would be cool. Other than that, there's the usual multitude of improvements to things like the job editor and other applications, just to act on client feedback, some improvements and some bug fixes as well, where we've discovered issues or problems with applications or modules that needed to be fixed. We hope you enjoy the new release, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you and goodbye.